Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Your Brain on College session. I had posted a link that has some helpful information for you all, and you can also pick it up. One announcement is the Maricopa scholarships are due October 31st. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dr. Romero. He is new to Chandler Gilbert, but not new to teaching psychology or sharing his passion for positive psychology. So please welcome Dr. Fernando Romero.
Welcome everyone. My name is Dr. Fernando Romero. I teach psychology here at Chandler Gilbert. This is my very first semester at Chandler Gilbert. I'm very happy to be here because I'm local. I live very close to campus. Before I used to work at Glendale Community College for 15 years, so that was quite a commute. Today we're going to talk about positive psychology, and this is meant to be more of a dialogue, a discussion, rather than a straight up lecture. We do have some limitations. I have to stay here put so that people that are accessing this event from home can look at us in the camera, and the audio can be picked up. And for those of you at home, can you please give us some thumbs up in terms of just testing the audio, making sure that you can hear me, and people seem to be responding well? Yeah? Okay. So to help you kind of like relax a little bit and break the ice, I want to ask everybody to do something really silly. We're going to look like a kindergarten class now. And if we all participate, is not lame. Now, if only a few people do it, then it kind of is, right? So everybody participates. I'm going to ask you to take a deep breath on the inhale, and on the exhale, we're going to hum together, and we're going to create a big humming noise in the classroom, okay? To the count of 3, inhale, hum. Sounds really cool. I know you can do better than that. And at home, please help us out. We're going to try it one more time and see if we can bring that hum a little bit louder. To the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Inhale. Beautiful. That sounds so good. That warms my heart. So it turns out that when we hum, we begin to activate a division of the nervous system called the parasympathetic division of the nervous system. And that division of the nervous system deals with the opposite of the stress response. Anybody knows what is the opposite of the stress response is called? I bet that nobody knows. Because in our society, we just talk about stress. But we talk very little about the opposite of the stress response. For 1,000 fake points, who can tell me what that is? It's called the relaxation response. The opposite of the stress response is the relaxation response. There's a famous book published by Dr. Benson at Harvard University in the 1970s, and he described the idea of the relaxation response in detail. He has received very little attention, unfortunately, because we seem to be obsessed with the negative, we seem to be obsessed with stress, but we don't pay attention to the antidote to stress, which is the relaxation response. And when we go, we activate the vagus nerve, which actually touches every single major organ in your body. So just one quick strategy that you can use from positive psychology is to breathe, take a deep breath, activate the relaxation response, and then go on to do whatever it is that you need to do, especially if you're under stress. So today, we're going to be talking about positive psychology. I may include some ideas about mindfulness and meditation. And the take-home message is that in positive psychology, mindfulness and meditation, we can take many take-home messages and many lessons that seem to point out in this direction in terms of benefits. And it points in this direction in terms of reducing problems in our lives. So now, because I said to you, I want this to be a dialogue, not just me lecturing, I want you to pick out one or two words that you're not familiar with and ask me which those are, and I can help you begin to process that information.
Got a lot of rumination,
Rumination.
flexibility.
Show of hands. How many of you were also wondering about rumination? So look around, that's the majority of the classroom. A lot of people online as well.
Yep, and rigidity,
And rigidity. Okay,
cognitive flexibility.
okay.
Those are the
How many of you have had like a part-time job, maybe in the service industry, doing something like that? A lot of you, right? Have you ever had to deal with like a nasty client, somebody that is kind of like abusive, right? And you are bothered by that person, but only until you're driving back home, you think of the perfect comeback line. And you're like, damn it, I wish I could have said that in that moment. That would have been such a sweet burn, you know, like that person would have like stopped on her tracks. You almost feel like you want to make a U-turn and go back and, you know, do your little line. That's rumination. So rumination is when we keep thinking and thinking and thinking about the same idea and we don't let it go. Does that happen to you? You catch yourself having conversations with yourself about like burns or things you should have said to other people, right? So that's rumination. And in psychology, we talk about the automatic pilot, which is the mind. So the mind sometimes goes on automatic pilot if you are not using mindfulness. So guess what's one of the things that when you allow the mind to go on autopilot, it loves to do? Based on what we just talked. It loves to ruminate, right? So if you ever catch yourself thinking about those imaginary conversations and lines where you could have just like given the punchline to somebody, watch out, because that is probably activating stress in you. That's probably activating a lot of negative emotional consequences for you, negative cognitive consequences for you. But the more you can learn to regulate away from that, the more you head into this direction, the more you can increase your focus, increase your working memory, increase your flexibility, increase the quality of your relationships. Rigidity was the other one, right? Okay, so life is kind of like a river, and we float through life, but then this river has two banks. The bank on the top end is the bank of anxiety. And at the bottom is the bank of depression. So sometimes we go from like anxiety to depression, like when a person is experiencing, let's say, for example, bipolar patterns, right? So the idea is how to find a navigation of your day and your weeks and your years that is more towards the center. Rigidity happens when our life is tilting more towards the bottom bank, towards depression. So depression and rigidity go together. Anxiety and chaos go on the opposite end towards the top bank. Does that make sense? So rigidity is this inability that we have to adapt, to change, to circumstances. So again, with positive psychology, the idea is that you become more flexible and more adaptive, and you can navigate and stay in the middle as opposed to going towards chaos or rigidity. So those are some of the main topics. So do you think you can go home and say, I think I got something tangible. I kind of like got the gist of what this whole thing is all about? Okay, that's, if you don't remember anything else, just remember these points and you'll be able to find your way back to many of the questions or ideas that I share with you today. Okay, so I'm going to attempt to continue helping you activate some emotions, especially towards the positive end. So I'm going to play a video and hopefully this makes you at least smile. Okay, so I'm just trying to activate a little bit of emotion. And what happens is nobody can really tell you the meaning of life. And if somebody's trying to tell you what the meaning of life is, you should run away because they're going to ask you for some type of donation, or they're going to involve you into a cult or something like that. But so nobody can tell you what the meaning of life is, but what we can tell you is life is meaningless without emotions. And it turns out that emotions and learning always go together, right? So if you have declared a major because you love doing those kinds of things, then what you do day in and day out at school for your classes, or maybe if you're doing an internship, if you love doing what you're doing, then that's probably involving emotions that make what you do meaningful. But if you're coming to college and things don't really click, you don't really enjoy them, they don't make you feel passionate, you just feel like you're here to get a grade or some type of external reward, then you're probably going to get in trouble because whatever it is that you're doing may not necessarily really click in with what you intend to achieve. Does that make sense? So remember, activating emotion can begin to help you learn better. So that's another key principle. Oops. Okay, so now, and we have this idea of positive psychology kind of like embedded into our culture, kind of like embedded into our constitution. We have this idea that we want to create opportunities so that our citizens can pursue happiness, so that we can be free to pursue the best outcomes in our lives, right? Now, what I want to ask you is, what makes you happy in reality? So what I want you to do is text to the number 37, oops, activity unavailable. This is, I usually have nightmares that look like this.
We did have a question in the chat.
Yes, go ahead. That will help him.
What if we don't know what to do? And so we're just going to college for the grades.
Yeah, so instructions are not appearing. The poll is activated. I don't know what's going on here.
to
The slides?
yeah, show that and then we'll wait.
Okay,
You should see it.
but I'm not on presenting mode. That's okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So while you do this, I'm asking you, what kinds of things make you happy? Just write one word that describes what makes you happy. If this doesn't work, we can always call it out and then people in the chat can reply. But the question was, what happens if you go to college and you're not really intrinsically motivated to attend the classes because you want to attend those classes? What happens if you're only there because you want the grade, right? So I think the most important thing to recognize is what is the purpose of going to college. And if you're not necessarily connecting what you're doing on an everyday basis with your future, so there is a specific theory of motivation called future time perspective. If you are not seeing the connection with what you do on an everyday basis with the future, then most likely you're going to have that experience that attending a class is only for jumping a hoop or getting a specific grade. So it may be that you need to project yourself into the future and begin to figure out where you want to go. Does that make sense? But that question is actually getting ahead of my presentation because I was kind of like heading in that direction anyway. So just hold on to the basic idea that I just presented to you and I'll be able to give you some feedback.
Still, I'm just sharing the directions again.
Okay. Oh, we do have responses. Beautiful. So they're not just loading up. So I'm seeing family at the center, friendship, time, love, people, dogs, sports, sunsets. So I see a lot of social connections, a lot of social interactions. And in reality, I think I read buying somewhere. Traveling, that's a big one. Kids. Okay, so when we ask people, try to go back into your life and think about like the happiest moment in your life, or what do you think will make you happy? The majority of people report some type of social interaction, interacting with others. Very few people say, oh, the time I bought something expensive that is material, right? Even though we seem to think that, so when you ask Americans, very frequently people associate money with happiness. In reality, when you ask them to really describe their moments of happiness, they're more likely to give you something that is more of a social interaction. So that's kind of like the point of that basic activity, even though it kind of did not work. Okay, so what I'm trying to get at is that we have a brain that represents the world. So that's a key idea. Our brain constructs reality in the way it knows how to construct reality. We can never know the world the way it is outside of us. Does that make sense to you? So pretty much the world that we live in is a mental representation. It's a ginormous mental representation that we all carry with us. And we take past experience with current thoughts to make predictions about the future, right? So your brain may tell you that a specific thing that you do may give you a specific outcome, but that may be just a simulation of reality. That may not necessarily be reality. And it turns out that when it comes to happiness, the brain is actually a pretty lousy simulator of reality. When we think we make a decision, or when we think we can just predict outcomes and how we will feel about those outcomes just by using prediction, we actually don't do very well. As you can see in this picture. This is a couple of brains. Well, actually 3 brains, because I see 3 people now. I never saw this hand before. This is a really bad simulation of reality. I see some comments in the chat. Okay, so it turns out that when it comes to positive psychology and when it comes to happiness, we have a lot of myths. And I've been teaching about these concepts for many, many years. I picked up the number 1 myth that I have found to represent positive psychology in a different way. So today I'm only doing a really basic introduction to positive psych, but this is one of those things that I think are at the top of my list. So this is what we do. We think that happiness is increasing the probability of having positive emotions and decreasing the probability of having negative emotions. So if you find a way to feel more positive emotions, then you'll be happier. And if you find a way to get rid of negative emotions, then you'll be happy, right? That's kind of like how we live our lives. But it turns out that that's a really dangerous way of living. And if you continue thinking like that, you're going to get yourself in a lot of trouble. As I was describing before, so I'm going to try to draw something here on the board. Hopefully people at home can see it. We navigate life kind of like life is like a river, right? And we navigate through life with ups and downs. But when we think of our psychology following this mythology, then we think that the purpose of life is to increase positive emotion. And then what we wind up doing is buying a lot more things that we can afford, for example, or going to concert tickets, and then experimenting with stuff that is going to increase our temporary satisfaction, only to crash, right? We do this with food. We do this with Monster drinks, anybody? We do this with relationships, right? So we think, oh my God, I got a cup of coffee and I felt like a boost. Maybe I need to get 2 cups of coffee to get even a bigger boost. Or I purchased something on Amazon and I felt really happy. Maybe I need to purchase something every day on Amazon and that will make me really happy, right? So very quickly, that turns into a psychology of addiction. Make sense? So focusing on positive emotions by themselves can get you into a lot of trouble. But also we think that we need to avoid negative emotions as well. So one of the issues that you guys deal with is fear of public speaking. All right? Just let's be honest. Raise your hands here and also at home if you feel uncomfortable public speaking. Be honest. It's okay. But usually that's the majority of people, right? So if public speaking is kind of like uncomfortable and awkward, should you just avoid public speaking altogether? Is that what's going to make you happy? Right? So what's the cure for the fear of public speaking, by the way? Practice, practice, practice. The cure for the fear of public speaking is public speaking. So I'm giving you just an insight into the fact that happiness is not about trying to get the most out of positive emotions and trying to avoid or push away negative emotions. Instead, the idea is to integrate them. Does that make sense? And that's tricky. How to integrate negative emotions is very tricky. Okay, what is the meaning of the yellow traffic light? You see yellow and you floor it, right? For some of us, we see yellow traffic lights and we floor it. For some of us, we see the yellow traffic light and we slow down. Now, in Arizona, it's kind of tricky because sometimes if you slow too fast, somebody hits you in the back, right? So that's a really common accident. So I've been telling you that the brain is a reconstruction of the world. The brain represents the real world. So when you're driving your car, your brain is representing that world at 50 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour, whatever, right? So you're like running multiple simulations about what's about to happen. But the world treats different simulations differently. So if your simulation is, what's your name up front? Devin. So if your simulation is accelerate, eventually through weeks and months and years, the world is going to treat you differently than if your representation back there. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, man. Yeah. If your representation is slowed down, then the world through days and weeks and months and years is going to treat you differently. Does that make sense? So the idea is, how can we use positive psychology to come up with the best simulations so that we can live our lives to navigate this river of life towards the center without trying to rely on positive emotions and without trying to avoid negative emotions, right? So sometimes if you're driving really fast with a motorcycle, you feel like you'll be happier or you'll achieve your objective if you just pass everybody. But in reality, when you actually, if you were to count how many minutes you save in your commute by passing people, chances are you're not saving any time at all. How many times have you seen people speeding only to find them in the next life, right? So those are kind of like basic examples of how we simulate reality. And you guys are college students. So your simulations of reality are associated with simulating your future in terms of academic development. So I'm going to come back to that question that was asked online about how we run simulations about being intrinsically or extrinsically motivated to complete a career. So if your simulator is, I'm only here because I need a grade, then those simulations are not going to necessarily help you achieve the tasks as if you were more intrinsically inclined to achieve the academic outcomes that you want to achieve. So Americans, we deal with a lot of mental representations that are not the most adaptive when it comes to fast food. And the mental simulations that we have about food consumptions are making us really, really obese. As a population, we are overweight. Our media, the simulations about what we mean is news, our simulations about what we mean is being informed, are ridiculous. These days, people are getting their news from Facebook. Anybody can make up anything, and we just consume that reality. So we need to run better simulations about what counts as good information, for example. Money, power, stress, having fun, social recognition. And we wind up reinforcing people that are very toxic for our societies because we run those simulations of reality. Okay, so now is your time to be active. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes to talk to people around you. Please conserve the 3-meter distance, social distance. But I really want to stop talking because if I continue talking, you guys are going to pass out. And I want you to identify something negative that happened to you in your life. that at the beginning seemed negative. It was temporarily a setback, perhaps. But in the end, it actually helped you. So, and online, so like 4 people per room online. So that would be good. And we don't have a lot of time because I finish at 1 o'clock, right? So I'm only going to give you 3 minutes. If you need a little extra time, that's fine. So do you guys know what to do? Just talk to a person next to you, find somebody, and just see if you can identify something negative, a temporary setback that happened to you in your life that actually was kind of like a blessing in disguise. So go for it. Thank you so much for sharing. Anybody here in person would like to share? Do we have any brave souls? Thank you, appreciate it. So I don't know if the people online were able to hear that. Oh, that's beautiful. You're the best. Oh, so a lot of people are seconding whatever you mentioned. I'll share an example. So when COVID hit, I had started to flirt with the idea of learning a third language. And when COVID hit, I really needed to do something creative. And I decided to pick up Italian as a third language. And now I can speak Italian kind of fluently. It came easy to me because I speak Spanish as my native language. But I actually, a lot of ideas started to spawn in my head. And hopefully I'm applying for a sabbatical. And in the spring of 2023, I may go to teach to Italy, in Italy, at the University of Bologna for 2 months. So I'll be pretty excited, but I want to start a program to bring you guys as well as for a foreign exchange program or to have opportunities like that. So I knew at that moment that I was going to miss that interaction with people. So I sought extra interaction online, and I learned. I went up picking a third language. So that's the kind of thing. And I actually spoke to Riley up front here. She had a couple of years back.
It's actually right when COVID hit.
Oh, right when COVID hit, she had a major injury in gymnastics, and she had to quit gymnastics altogether. And she started to pick up a different sport that had to do with like CrossFit and bodybuilding. And now she's really in love with that. And it has actually evolved into a profession. Now she actually has clients and she works with people. So what was a setback actually put her in a different direction. So going back to the student that asked a question about only coming to college for the grade, there might be things that are happening to you that you may be perceiving as negative. Chores or homework or things that you may be doing right now that are kind of like negative. But if you bring a sense of acceptance into the experience and you begin to take a little bit more authentic approach to your college experience, you may be in for a big surprise. In the same way that some of our students just rediscover online instruction or better education through COVID, or a new career, or how to drive more safely, or better relationships, right? Sometimes we experience grief in our personal relationships when we end a relationship, but we may figure out that we were better off for that. So that's kind of like the idea of helping you understand that happiness is not just about positive emotion. And this is something that could be applied in your everyday lives, because then you realize that sometimes we go through painful experiences. Sometimes we have to go through uncomfortable things because we need to go through that process. Does that make sense? And maybe we don't have to rely on making purchases that we cannot afford on Amazon. Maybe we can learn to make sacrifices by saving some money, which in the short term feels like a negative experience, but in the long term, it may serve us better. Is making a little bit more sense now? Now, the research is really kind of funny because we find that people that win the lottery 6 months later go back to pretty much the same level of life satisfaction that they experienced prior to winning the lottery. So if you think you're going to be happy by winning the lottery, yeah, you're going to get a boost, but 6 months later, you'll be back down to pretty much the same level you were. And also people that think are going to want to avoid, let's say, for example, breaking up with somebody, a divorce, or people that are afraid of losing their jobs. They think that if any of that happens to them, they're going to be miserable, and we kind of like live in fear. But we find out that when people go through that, roughly speaking, 6 months later, they bounce back and they're about the same level in terms of life satisfaction. Now, evolutionarily speaking, our brain, probably it's a good thing that it has not learned that if you just leave your spouse 6 months later, you'll be okay. So I think that simulation of wanting to stick with your spouse is a good one overall. But it's important to be reminded of those kinds of things, especially if you're not in a good relationship. Because at that moment, it may feel like the end of the world. Like my daughter is in middle school, and one of her friends just broke up with the boyfriend that she had like last week, and now she's miserable and she feels like it's the end of the world. But they haven't even been together for like a week. But that's kind of like normal teenage psychology. But in a way, there's a lot of irrational ways in which we represent our lives. And sometimes we think that we need to avoid certain things just because they're too negative and we will not be able to bounce back, or that we need to reach for some things because they're going to be so fantastic. And then we realize it's not kind of. Have you ever like bought a toy or wanted something for Christmas so badly, you got it, and then later you're like, eh. Have you ever had that experience like growing up? Right? So it's kind of like that.
I wanted to share
Yes.
some discussion in the chat.
Beautiful.
So a lot of people were interested in the marriage slide.
Yes.
They felt marriage should be saw it as depressing. It's the same.
Yeah. And that's something that is very, very important to in our society. We have this myth that I need to find somebody else to make me happy. That's a really bad mental simulation that we carry around. Do not expect that another person will make you happy. If you want to be happy, who needs to be doing the work? This guy, right? Yeah, we cannot marry other people with the expectation that they will make us happy. It's too much. And we really have unrealistic expectations for our spouses. Totally unrealistic. There is this really cool author called Esther. Oh my God.
Mr. Frell.
Perel. Thank you. I was blanking on the last name. Esther Perel. I recommend all of her books. She even has a podcast. Her podcast is amazing. Esther Perel. You can write in the chat. I'll really appreciate it. Thank you. And she has a really, really famous TED talk where she talks about this. Like we expect, check this out. This is probably ahead because you guys are very young, but when we get married, we kind of expect the same person to give us stability, but we expect the same person that is supposed to be there to give us stability to make us feel passionate and surprise us. So we're like sending all kinds of mixed messages to one another. So I've been married for 21 years and I can say that I'm happily married. It has not been an easy trip. I made a lot of mistakes. I wish I knew a lot of this stuff when I started. So it has not been an easy ride for my poor wife. But overall, I think that we are very happy. But I have learned to overcome many of those unrealistic expectations. So for the people who wrote that on the chat, did I answer your questions?
Yeah, it was just general comments.
General
I want to
comments.
share because it was interesting.
There was a theme there. But I want to know if you guys are satisfied or want me to address any particular issue. So I have this roller coaster because life has ups and downs. And eventually, like the idea is to not just rely on the stress response, not rely on the automatic pilot to guide us through our lives, but instead see if we can begin a little bit more hum into our lives, however you do it. Because you don't really have to become Buddhist or meditate. Many of you who are Catholic or you're Jewish, you're already doing some of this when you attend your temples or your synagogues or your mosque. Or you may be doing it when you practice your sports. You may be doing it when you're knitting or quilting or painting. So some of you may already be doing a lot of that activation of the relaxation response by yourselves. Now, we have three animals inside of us. We have a lizard, we have a monkey, and we have a human. Now, the lizard brain is the bottom of our psychology. And the job of the lizard is to avoid threats. So there's a part of our psychology that we all have that doesn't want threats and it likes to avoid them. On top of the lizard, we have a monkey. Yes, the monkey is the midbrain, like the limbic system. Beautiful. So the midbrain is the monkey that wants rewards. So while the lizard wants to avoid threats, the monkey wants to pursue rewards. So what kinds of rewards does the monkey like? Name them out loud. Money, food, validation. So anything that tastes good, that feels good, right? So chocolate and ice cream and sprinkles and all kinds of things like that. Delicious stuff. And then here we are, the human, having to deal with the lizard and having to deal with the monkey, right? So remember, if the human thinks these two guys are going to be happy only if I avoid what the lizard doesn't want to try out and give rewards to what the monkey wants, we wind up gaining a lot of weight and never getting rid of the fear of public speaking. Which gets us to the biggest myths about positive psychology, which is that if you just think and you visualize and you just stay positive, things will work out. That's not what I'm teaching here at all. That's not positive psychology. We call that wishful thinking, and that's not even scientific. By the way, if you go to Barnes and Noble, if you go to Amazon, there is a ton of books on wishful thinking and how you can find happiness following this 5-minute recipe every day. But in reality, happiness is about hard work. And it's about really putting in the effort day in and day out, making the sacrifices, learning to accept the negative things that happen to us in our lives, right? So from the heartbreaks to the physical injuries, to the challenges that our society may bring to us, or COVID, or fires, or earthquakes and hurricanes, and then adapting and dealing with life and trying to figure out a way out. So I'm running out of time, so I just want to share this quote. I don't think I selected the best background, but this reads, "With equanimity, you can deal with situations with calm and reason while keeping your inner happiness." So equanimity is everything that I've been talking about. Making sure that you don't rely on the highs of positive emotions. You don't try to avoid the loss of negative emotions. Instead, you try to reduce the amplitude of those waves. So equanimity is trying to find a balance. Yes, it's okay to go for positive experiences, but not overdo it. And it's okay to have some fears, but try to embrace the tasks that you need to do. So reducing the amplitudes of positive and negative emotions is called equanimity. That brings us to a redefined definition of happiness beyond positive emotions. So in positive psychology, we say that it's important to experience joy, contentment, and positive well-being. But at the same time, we need to be developing a good sense of life, a meaningful sense of life, and a worthwhile sense of life. Because if you're just pursuing joy or positive emotions by themselves, without them being linked with good values or good outcomes or meaningful perspectives or something that is worth achieving, then chances are you're looking for happiness in the wrong place. So happiness needs to be a more integrated concept. Make sense? So let me share a quick video with you to show you how, for a college student, just relying on external factors and running poor simulations can get you into a lot of trouble.
To help people find their dream job. Most students attend their class because they feel utterly lost or miserable in their current career. One student named Janine was a successful lawyer in her mid-30s who had everything she had wanted. She got her college degree, her law degree, she had a good marriage, and a career at a top law firm doing important and influential work. But after
Okay, so this person said, her brain simulation of reality said, if I want to be happy, I need to get a college degree, I need to get a law degree, I need to get in a good marriage, then I need to start working for a law firm and become a partner, and then I'll be happy.
driving home from the law firm, she would often sit out on her deck at night and cry. She had the life that she once wanted, so why wasn't she happy? Another student named Elise decided to quit her job several years ago and fulfill her dream of opening an Italian deli with a small cafe inside, just like the ones you see in Tuscany. She rented a building, renovated it, stocked it with the best Italian food, and then opened it to the public. It was a huge success. Her business was making money, and her dream had become a reality. But Elise was miserable. She hated the day-to-day experience of managing staff, tracking inventory, and doing all the little things that were needed to keep the business running.
Okay, so these two are examples of people that when they were students, when they were your age, they ran a mental simulation, and they said, if I do this, I can be successful and I'll be happy. And they did all of the steps, they did all of the things that were required, the counseling and completing the degrees. But this is pretty much the outcome that is waiting for you if you are completing your degree just to get a grade or just to get a job or just to make money. So it's actually interesting that the student asked that question at the beginning, because it's almost as if they had predicted that we were going to head in this direction, right? And I did not pay $20 to that person, right? That just worked out perfectly. So, but I think she kind of like predicted some of the things that I wanted to share with you today. So this is why it's very important for you to stop and really reflect. If you want help in this area, especially if you're sitting here and you're thinking, I actually don't care for my classes. I actually haven't really put a lot of attention or thought into my degree. I would highly, highly recommend that you visit a website called Designing Your Life. Designing Your Life. It's a project that was developed at Stanford University by Dave Edwards and Bill Burnett. And what they do is that they teach you a series of strategies that look something like this. You do research on yourself over a period of at least 8 weeks. And what you do is that you keep track of the things that bring you pleasure on an everyday basis, right? So you kind of like start a journal and then you say, today I did this activity, and you really excited me. This was a lot of fun. Today, I attended a lecture on positive psychology, and I had a lot of ideas. So if this lecture is capturing your imagination, if this is exciting to you, write it down, because there may be something in here that is beginning to resonate with you. Now, I do not expect everybody to click with this information, because you may have other different goals, you may be in a different point in your life, so that's fine. But the more you can begin to really learn who you are and begin to realize what kinds of experiences you like to engage and be part of, then that would pay off, especially if you can begin to maybe do internships or go ask people. Let's say, for example, what's your major, if I can ask you? Criminal justice, right? So let's say, for example, you want to go into forensic psychology, and you wanted to work, let's say, for example, in courtrooms, let's say. So before you do all of these things and check, would it be a good idea for you to at least go to a courtroom and look what that environment looks like, and maybe shadow one of the people that you would like to be like, to see what that feels like? And if you go over there, you're like, oh my God, this is so depressing. Maybe that's not for you. Like, should you be a medical doctor, a medical or a pre-med student, if you haven't yet found out that you're actually afraid of blood? Right? Those are the kinds of things that the brain cannot simulate for you. You actually have to experience it. So just to close, because I only have like 2 more minutes, there is no way to simulate your future world. I don't care how smart you are, your brain will not be able to give you the simulation to predict exactly how things are going to pan out. So if we learn that the brain is a really bad simulator of reality, maybe we can begin to use some strategies to begin to help our brains regulate reality and regulate experiences by bringing into mind at least some strategies that can point us in the right direction. That's all I have for you, but I think I have a couple of minutes in case. Yes, beautiful.
And it was when you were drawing the zigzag of the river.
Yes.
And somebody brought up, how does hitting on those positive things connect to creating an addiction?
Yeah, so what happens is, let's say, for example, I'm actually drinking my coffee here. I'm from Colombia, so that's a plug for coffee. Call me coffee. So I really love my coffee. I taste it and I enjoy it. And it's a small, teeny tiny thing, but it brings me a ton of pleasure. If I was on cocaine, I would not be able to enjoy my coffee, because the brain doesn't, it changes your threshold of experience altogether. If you rely on substances to give you pleasure, I mean, I guess coffee is a substance, but like hardcore substances, your brain actually starts shutting down connections, receptors for dopamine. And yes, maybe the first time you took the drug, you got a high, but if you become addicted to the drug, it's going to take more cocaine to give you the high, because your brain is adapting to those heights because they're way over the bank. So that's the problem when you reach the bank. You actually start changing your neurochemistry, and that stuff is very dangerous because you spiral out of control. And it's kind of like your brain needs to, in order to deal with this level of stimulation, it needs to counteract it. So it's going to take you from one end to the other. So that's why a lot of people, when they go on a high, then they crash. Right? So same thing, even with basic things. If you eat a lot of sugar, you're going to get sugar highs, sugar spikes, only to crash later on. So maybe include food that doesn't spike as quickly in terms of your insulin, and maybe that actually is slower. So if you eat a banana in the mornings, you're going to intake your sugar, but it's a slower incline, and then you're not going to crash as fast. We're out of time. To me, it's always a pleasure to talk about this. I could talk about this all day long. I really thank you for participating today and for showing up. If you have any questions, you can feel free to stick around, and I'll see you when I see you. Good luck. Take care. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Very, very nice. Thank you, Dr. Bayer. Thank you, Dr. Romero. Wonderful way to start a Monday.
My
Appreciate it.
pleasure. Thank you.